Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Today, my guest is a repeat guest, music composer David Robbins, who I had the pleasure of speaking a couple of times, mainly for Tim Robbins' film Dead Man Walking, which you can look at the end of this video. And this time, he's here to talk about a documentary called Project Kashmir. It was released about 20 years ago. It's very rare to find, so a little challenging for you guys to go check it out. But if you do find it, please do watch it. It's one of the most incredible documentaries I've seen about two protagonists who are also directors, one Indian, one Muslim, one Pakistani, one Hindu, and how they navigate their way into Kashmir. And incidentally, that topic is back in the news. My conversation with David was amazing. We talked about the film, the politics, the music, and how he finds his inspiration to create the wonderful music that he does. So without further ado, here's my conversation with music composer David Robbins. Yeah,
I'm not.
you just gotta adapt, but it is what it is. You deal with it and you go forward.
Yeah,
Um, Thank you so much for joining for to speak about something that you and I spoke about a while back. I think it was a year ago or so, maybe even 2 years ago. Um, Project Kashmir, which is a documentary that
yeah,
you worked on.
yeah.
And never heard of it until you mentioned it to me, and then saw it. And boy, what an incredible documentary! What an
Yeah.
incredible story! And I know the subcontinent story, I wouldn't say really, really well, but quite well, being from there, from that part of the world,
Right.
and just sort of seeing these characters mainly being the protagonists who are also the directors, and how they meet the locals from from both sides, and how that sort of unravels is incredible. And I will say, and I say it in full compliment, which I'm sure you'll recognize, that I did not hear music for the first half of the film, because even though it was there, it was just the tension was so much there, and the characters, that it
Yeah.
really subtly played. And then I had to pay attention. I'm like, oh, I'm speaking to David, so I got to pay attention to the music. And then I got started paying attention to the music, and obviously it was there, but very subtle.
I do consider that a compliment because that's kind of the way I approach, especially documentaries. You cannot, I mean, you have to have a red alert all the time about manipulation. You cannot become as much of a character as you can in certain other types of film. But yeah, it kind of I resaw it the first time since I worked on it, and it's it makes you very scared sometimes. I mean, it's like, oh my God, where are these people? What is going to happen? It's like it was such a volatile place and still is,
Well,
and
as
you
of
know,
last 2 weeks ago,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So.
crazy.
But just for the audience, I mean, I know the context. I don't want to talk about it, but from what you know, what did you learn about the story in Kashmir? What the dispute is? Aside, and we'll get to the film just to kind of establish the context as much as you know now, or what you knew before you were started working on it.
Hmm. Um, I first kind of got on the radar, or went, had some experience with, I was on a film jury in Locarno, I guess around 2002, 2003. And
Mm,
there was one of the documentary, well, it was a drama film based on history of the uh, takeover, I guess, of that part of the world. The Kashmir, and the disputed, and how they were forcing entire regions of populations to move from one place to another, and it was kind of built. That story was very engaging. It ended up winning one of the prizes that we had. It was by far the best of that genre that I had seen. And that kind of really got me a lot more knowledgeable and aware of what was going on there. Other than that, I mean, it was very little politics that were talked during Dead Man Walking, with Nusrat's people and that, but yeah, that kind of opened my eyes to it. And when Sanan and Geeta approached me to do it, um, I I saw some rough cut, and it's like this could be, this could be incredible. And I had lots of ideas, and that's usually a kind of a tell that uh, I'm going to have a good experience working on it. And it would, it had, like everything, had its difficult moments, but um, there, there was a little rub at times about where to have music, where not to have music, or you know, and I left it being happy with what I've done. And since I saw it again, I mean, I noticed that after I'd gone, they did a little manipulation here and there as far as, placement and redoing, reusing certain things that I hadn't done. But it's all, they didn't do anything negative to it really. So I'm all good with it, and that usually happens anyway to some
Yeah,
degree
yeah.
or another. It's just part of the thing. And you can't, I've probably said this before, but you can't have an ego if you want to be a composer.
You can't have an ego
You
in
know?
anything, especially in the entertainment industry, plus composer,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous thing to have, and people, it's not productive if you put yourself in the way. Um, but
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the story of the film is interesting, right? Like you have a Muslim woman and a Hindu woman, both from America, with
and
their connection with
friends, yeah,
and France and their sorry, France and their connections with the through their families in India and Pakistan, how they go to this disputed part of the region, which is divided in more or less two parts, one controlled by India, the other by Pakistan, and how they meet all these peoples, and how they have their point of view. And it's interesting because I have I have never seen a documentary on Kashmir like that,
hmm
and it makes it, and there's a lot of dialogue in that, like, you hear one thing, you see one thing, and the truth is another.
yeah,
Which I think, like, one of the characters, I think his name was Muzammil, he says that.
yeah.
And so but when you hear like these conversations from all the players, for the lack of a better word, in this conflict, including the protagonist, and how they're trying to sort of make the other side understand their point of view, it just, makes you question about a lot of stuff too. Like, okay, what is the truth? Whose
Yeah.
fault is it? Whose fault is it not? Is it everybody's fault? Or is it nobody's fault? What is the truth?
And it was also their awakening to how they couldn't. I mean, they learned, and they learned about themselves, but they also were disturbed at the reaction of the people there to them, depending on
Who they were with?
situation. Yeah, and it was and I think they learned over the course of doing that about how volatile it is there, and how they people can get themselves killed, by uh, fraternizing or saying too much. I mean, there's certain times in the documentary where they just put the camera facing the ground just so it just because they're they went there on the guise of being tourists, and to get this, and that's dangerous in itself, and but yeah, they had that own kind of reckoning with their own friendship, which it was never something that never really entered into the picture here until they went there, and it's pretty deep when you see that, um, and struggling with their own um, ideas and assumptions about the way things are. And I think that the more they learned to listen, the more they kind of got to where they could understand it a little better.
Yeah,
Uh, Even though it's so complex, that
it
whole,
is.
and
It
it's
is.
generational. It's been going on for a long time.
And I mean, I'll get to your music in a second, but the two most interesting parts for me, one was a scene, and I think her name is was it Nina or Naina, Muzambil's friend, the
Oh
woman with
yeah, Nena, I believe. Yeah.
Nana, yeah. When she's in the part where there's a lot of Muslims and they recognize, from the facial features and everything that she's not, and she's feeling uncomfortable, but they keep welcoming her for
Hmm.
tea. And you see the look on her eyes and that dead silence, that plays in the film for a good 20 to 30 seconds. Like, how is she feeling and how is she reacting? How she
Yeah.
had misjudged that. And then Muzammil's, like, throughout the film, he was very, he seemed very kind of charismatic, very balanced, and then something hit him, and then he just went completely quiet, which
Yeah.
there's a phone conversation. Those were two of my favorite parts of the entire film. But what about you? Well, what
I
moved you
kind
as,
of agree with that. I mean, there was this kind you can always feel and hear this couching and this guard that's up with, especially Musamil, and being, charismatic the way he is, when that switch goes off, it's like all of a sudden he's feeling, wait a minute, I could get myself in some huge trouble here. So he's kind of like trying to intellectually figure out a way to back off. And he just, it was something that I'm not sure who said what, but it all of a sudden he realized that he was in a situation that he needed to back off of, because it was a dangerous place to be for him.
yeah, and I think this applies to everybody in the world. The people who are living in diaspora, no matter from where they're from, when
Yeah.
they're in the diaspora, they're surrounded by, different people, and they're not in that zone all the time. But when you go to your wherever you are from, and when you're surrounded by all of that, then your surroundings change your point of view, whether it's a right thing or a wrong thing. You can argue that, but that's exactly what happened with both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's uh it's pretty revealing, and like you say, I mean, it's a rare thing. That doesn't not many people have been able to pull anything like that off, so
Yeah.
it was
So
it
let
was quite a learning process for me,
so
for
let's
sure.
let's talk about the music. So about 5, 6 years before, you had worked on Dead Man Walking. I think that was a timeline, right? About maybe 8 years ago, uh,
uh
or longer.
no, it was after. I think
No,
that
no, Dead Man
oh,
Walking came in the before that,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. So it was about 6, 7, or 8 year gap between those two films, if I'm not
right,
mistaken.
right.
So you had worked on Dead Man Walking with Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and the elements of South Asian music in that film, and then you get approached by them, and how much of that you brought into this film, if any, but if not, then what were your research elements like? What did you have to do to make yourself familiarized? Because Kashmir is has its own culture. It's not India, it's not Pakistan. A lot of people don't know that, so they have their own music.
Yeah.
So just talk about that.
Well, it's like you say. I mean, it's something that I do as a rule. When I'm approached with something, I have all, this body of knowledge that I learned from doing Dead Man Walking during the course of that, which was a lot, but I needed to go into the more regional aspects of those three places basically, and it's different in Pakistan, like than it is in India, and it's different in Kashmir, and it's in ways it's kind of familiar and similar, but in ways it's different. And trying to find just little clues. And I don't even remember what I was listening to, but I usually go to places where I can buy folk music from particular regions, and that's what I did. And I, usually get at least a couple dozen CDs at the time, and just like listen to it. And and the instruments too. I had a very limited budget on this, so I couldn't hire a lot of people. But uh, the occasional times when you hear flute and voices, singers, those is where I was like super careful about what I was going to do because they can be so powerful, yet they, to people that know that well beyond what I know, I had to be continually sensitive to that. And the bed of the music was all mostly um, arpeggio synthesizer arpeggios and manipulated sounds that kind of morphed and did different things. And I'd add little accents here and there. That there's this one section. It's the second Crackdown, where that big bomb, you hear the
Mm,
bomb. And during that time, that piece is a good 10 minutes long. That kind of just flows and like a rolling sea, and sometimes it's very, very sparse. And I used an electric guitar with echo on it just to have this occasional repetitive da 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 da, fades away with that bed kind of rolling and changing, and it became really effective. And then that kind of transfers into a slightly more uh, relaxation of tension in the music after that. And that's when you start hearing the flute, which is a very beautiful flute playing and melodies and but just pieces of it, nothing
sure.
continued, and uh, it was as I do stuff like that, I learn as I go too, and I have I guess a good sense of what works dramatically, but also what is genuine, or what I try to make sure is genuine, as genuine as possible to the culture that I'm uh, putting music to, the story of the culture that I'm putting music to, cultures.
Mm.
Uh, and It's the first time. I mean, I haven't seen the movie since I worked on it, and it's the first time I saw it, and I had trouble finding it. As you know,
Yeah.
it took me a while, but I dug it up. It was actually sitting there on eBay, and they had exactly one copy.
Oh, wow.
So I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't. I have lost touch with Sanan and Gita as well. So I couldn't. I didn't know how to get in touch with them because the websites that were once valid weren't valid anymore.
Yeah.
So, but I'd be interested to see how they're doing and reconnect with them if that is to be.
I actually looked up their IMDb to see because that was like almost good 20 years ago, right?
Yeah,
And so I don't remember Sanan what she's up to, but Geeta, have you heard of this new series called Meet the Patels?
yeah, I heard of that. Yeah,
So she's, I think,
that's
either the
her.
creator and the director and maybe the protagonist too.
Oh,
So she's still doing it, but it's interesting how it went from Kashmir to something completely different. But it's been 20 years, so obviously she
yeah,
needs to do different
yeah.
things. But that's where she's at.
Oh,
Um,
cool. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah. So maybe you could connect with her. But yeah, no, I know I was telling my somebody I know who is really much into Kashmir for the last good 15 years, and I sent a message to them. I'm like, you have to see if this film, like I think it's one of the best films made, definitely the best film made on Kashmir in terms of a documentary.
Mhm.
Because, and one thing that it talks about, which I recently learned, there was, and I'll give you the names of those two films. There was a film that came out from India about 5 years ago. It's by this director who was nominated for an Oscar in 1970s as a 19-year-old Indian who traveled to the Academy Awards. He's a very
Mm.
talented guy. So he's originally from Kashmir. His name is Vidhu Vinod Chopra. And he made this film called Shikara. Shikara is that boat that they have in Kashmir that has a little, like, if you want to call it a little hut that people kind of just sit in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And it was about the Hindu Pandits,
Hmm.
which we just talked about in this film. Like I think Nana is one of the is a Pandit, and how they were migrated.
I don't know. So RT uh, is
I don't know her name. I'm just horrible with character names in movies.
the one that having tea with the lady that's a friend of Musamil. I
No, no,
think
no.
that's
You know the
the
one
other
who's
one.
Muzammil's friend,
Yeah.
where they're sitting in a restaurant, Muzammil, her,
Yeah.
and the two protagonists, Geeta and they're having this conversation. She has green eyes,
Yeah.
curly
Yeah.
hair. Yeah, so sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Well, it's the name. I seem to remember that her name was Arti for some reason.
Arti. Okay, maybe it's Arti. Maybe it's Arti.
Arti.
But she
Yeah.
belongs to a community called Pandits, which are Hindu
Yeah.
Pandits.
Yeah.
So I learned this 5 years ago, which I never knew. And they talk about this in this film that how Hindu Pandits' houses are taken away, but
Mm.
the Muslim Kashmiris people have lost their lives. But I did not know this until this film came out, which I would recommend that you watch it. It's actually beautifully shot, very character centered. That 400,000 Hindu Pandits migrated from Kashmir to India,
Mm.
and the Indian government couldn't care less about them. There was refugee camps in India of Hindu Pandits.
Wow.
So there's that element to the story too, which when I saw Project Kashmir, it just kind of resonated from that standpoint. But there's just so many layers to this, man. There's just so many layers.
I learned pundit what pundit is when I did a movie before this called The Day My God Died, and it was another documentary, and it was done by this guy who was his first film and the only film, as far as I know, that he did. But he got spyglasses from Peter Gabriel's organization, and he went into brothels in India, and it was about
Mm,
kidnapping and grooming,
trafficking and all that.
trafficking from Nepal, and a very heavy movie. But in that, I had a chance to I one of the connections that I had from when I did Dead Man Walking, when I talked to her about needing to find an Indian flute player, she said, "Well, there's this guy. He's a pundit, uh, and he's which I guess is it's an expert, a master of his discipline." And and he was in L.A. when I was going to be recording. So I hooked up with him, and his name was Ranu Majumdar.
Mm,
And man, this guy could play. It's like, wow. It was like that was the first time since Dead Man Walking where I said, I had that kind of fortune to having this unlikely master at what he does in the same place at the same time in the world to and generously bringing his talent to what I was working on. So that was that was really cool too. And anyway, I
yeah,
digress.
yeah. No, no, that's fine. That's all cool. But um, what's something that I mean, I kind of touched upon this at the very beginning, but what was something that you learned about this entire topic without learning anything, if that makes sense? Because it's such a deep topic, just like any other, political issue in the world. There's so many layers and stuff, and we all get here one side or the other side, and we emotionally react to it without trying to find, without trying to do more research and try to understand as deep it can. What was something that you picked on?
I I saw the depth of these differences and this conflict of peoples that is incredibly deep and historical and long lasting, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. You know, where all this kind of this stuff comes from. But I think what I got out of it was, you know, don't try to make judgments, just have empathy, you know, um, for because what I do, you know, what music does is it bridges those
Mm-hmm.
differences. And that's what I, you know, that's what I learned from it, and that's my special uh entry into bliss, if you want to say, about this artistic fortune uh of understanding cultures through music. And sometimes that's can be as deep in its own way, but there's all this beauty in their artistic expressions, and there's all this struggle and ugliness and suppression and of people's uh, of these same people, you know, and it's I can continue to learn about things. You know, books are a great way. You know, I've been
Yes.
I just happened to be reading about Joseph Campbell, the this expert at mythology, and how universal it is, and how um, it's and it's the same in cultures that could never have intermixed, you know, so long ago, with like the American Indians, with all, you know, people from Africa or Australia or um, Middle East, Far East, Japan, China, etc. That they all had these mythologies that seem to just, you know, be created by their environment. You know, there's the forest, there's the plains, there's um, the mountains, and wherever they're from, they have the same mythologies, but with different references of deities. You know, like your deities in the forest are different than the ones on the plain. It's like their relationship with animals and all of that. Anyway, I've been reading this, and it's this particular book that is a uh, an interview basically with Bill Moyers and Campbell, and it's really eye-opening. And you know that there's this universal thing about music that kind of ties right into that in a lot of ways. Um, and getting back to the most value for me is to understand the music and learn what I can about the people, but have empathy for the depth of their experience that I can't hope to know, you know,
Mm.
just not to judge them based on the surface. You know, that's not my that's not my job or my place or my want. You know, I would rather have harmony through art. You know, I would rather
Yeah.
enjoy that. And that's what I try to do all the time, not judge people.
And it's crazy that, we're talking about this such a deep issue that has stretched over the last 75 years,
Mhm.
with killings back and forth, with attacks or, all that. And people wonder like why they can't get along, and why don't, the word that you use is judgment, right? Like you're always judging people at that in those kind of situations. And sometimes I'm like, you don't even know what's going on next door to your house. You don't even have empathy for your own neighbor. Like you don't know what their story is. You don't know
Yeah,
what are they going through, and they don't know what you are going through. So
right.
we always make these assumptions, right? That's one of the things that I can't stand about people is that, and I'm guilty of that too. We all are. We assume things, which is, to me, is first step before judgment, right? Like you assume something that it's good, it's happening because it's happening, or XYZ such and such, and then you
Right.
start passing on judgment. So that's another problem, assumption.
Yeah, and it's if you're attuned to that. I mean, if you catch yourself with these bad assumptions that you make, it's a learning process through your life, and sometimes it's that those things kind of come more automatically if you're open to it, if you're empathetic instead of judgmental. And it is a learning process through your whole life, and you're never perfect at it. You're never
100%.
and it's like, especially in this country is a great example, just in the differences, the way amazingly how tribal it's become over the last 20, 30 years. Um and but if you meet this person, if you don't judge by something you see on TV or hear or read, uh and you meet that person instead of and just have a conversation with that person. That is much more valuable than anything, because you all of a sudden you see that is another human being. That is not a something. That is not
Yeah.
a they. It's a becomes a we, and that doesn't mean you have to agree on anything, but you're in front of that person. It's like it becomes a whole different relationship with understanding the other person,
And
and
that's what sorry, go on.
no, and just and letting them, or hoping that they understand you too. You know.
Right. And that's what I was saying in the beginning. In the film, there's the character Arti who's makes this assumption about, these group of people and who welcome her for tea over and over again, and they see it in her eyes that she's shocked and surprised that she's being welcomed. And that assumptions goes completely down the drain and the
Yeah,
judgment goes away because she interacted. I mean,
yeah.
they didn't even talk much. It was just like about discussion about tea.
Yeah.
How simple is that?
Well, also when she was showing her the building where she used to live, it's all just a
Yeah,
wreck.
yeah.
That this is where I grew up. This is, and that's really touching, and uh, kind of life changing in a lot of ways for the other people. For Gita and Sanan. And of course them, she and Arthi and the others as well. Just to see, picking up those pieces of paper that have been lying there for 20, 30 years,
Yeah.
whatever, and seeing what it's like, a snapshot in time, what was going on then. And it's amazing and heartbreaking too.
How much, when you were collaborating with Sanan and Geeta, uh, I'm assuming there's a lot of interactions that you had with both of them at the same time.
Yes, yes, they were
What
definitely a team.
what were they like, having seen the film and their friendships sort of lead into these arguments? I mean, there's this beautiful scene when they're kind of, I wouldn't say arguing, but maybe like at a very minimal made, they were arguing about this. She was presenting her point of view. Geeta and Sanan was presenting her, and then there's the shot goes from, single shots to like a wide shot of them sitting on the dining table, and she
Hmm.
puts a cup of tea, and there's like this roaring silence, and there's tension between them, right? Did that
Yeah.
ever come across when you were working with them? Not professional disagreements, but just that feeling
Not really.
of tension?
Not really. Not that I remember anyway. I think that their relationship kind of actually got stronger once they got back and started working on the post-production of this. And
Mm,
I think that they found a stronger uh, bond through that. That was my impression anyway. I mean, of course, yes, they had their disagreements as to uh, um, ways to go, but that to me it seemed healthy. It was a healthy interaction, and I'm trying not to get in the way of that. I mean, because that's informative on its own right.
yeah.
And yeah,
And I do think that, you have to be any friendship that tests, not just in the political cases, but any other thing, test the times of difficult disagreements. And if you can overcome that, then it becomes extremely strong after that, because then you have gone beyond the surface of your friendship, right? Like to touch those uncomfortable things that you're probably avoiding all your life.
Or yeah, or it never even really came up because
True.
their relationship in the States was one thing, and then that could either have torn them apart, or they got stronger, and they got stronger and tighter, as a result of that, and that's a good thing, and they made an excellent picture, an excellent told an excellent story, a hard one to tell.
How how well did it do at festivals? Because it is one of those films that if it was to come out right now, like it would do really, really well. Like I mean, even that time that was like after 9/11, so that topic of, you know, extremism or whatever you want to call it, terrorism and, the colonial stuff was pretty hot.
Well,
How well did it do at festivals?
I don't know I'm not aware of any festivals that it was in. I know that it was broadcast on,
ITVS?
yeah,
Yeah.
uh, and that was all the knowledge I had of it. I mean, I didn't, you know, it, I never got normally what I am able to get is a couple of copies of the finished product, and
Yeah.
I never did get that. So it kind of, I was pretty busy at that time too. So I was on to the next thing and the next thing at that time. But I never did get any awareness of any festivals other than the airing of it, and that was about it. Uh,
I think that
but
it probably was commissioned by ITVS, and normally when that happens, it's very rare for films to go through festival. I mean, not necessarily, but unless it was like commissioned exactly from them, then it's
mhm,
directly going to be broadcast.
right.
But I hope somebody picks up this film and puts it out there online because it's a very, I mean, sadly, it's still a timely topic, um,
Yeah.
but it's less political, more personal, and which is what's needed.
Maybe I can get in touch with Geeta and ask her if she's done anything about that. Because
Yeah, no, you should.
it was certainly hard enough for me to find when I was looking to find a copy of it, and it wasn't much, finally it took me a while, but I found the source. Uh, but
I
yeah,
mean, sometimes directors don't want to revisit that's, the past work because they've moved on. But
yeah,
I think at the same time, I do think it is something that it should be screened at different places or, maybe re-aired on television. I know those are like complicated things, but it's definitely something that people need to see for sure.
yeah, for sure. Um, it is sadly current again. Um,
Yeah.
that's not, I mean, it's it's just another awakening of that struggle in that part of the world that's never really gone away. It may have ebbed and flowed a little bit, calmed down, heated up, but we don't we don't hear much of that unless we're actively looking for it.
True, true.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Anything else cooking for you in the next little while, this rest of the year?
Mm, just we may be touring again this summer. Kind of trying to figure that out right now, or the summer or the fall. Might do a little bit more European and perhaps a national or West Coast tour of some sort of this of Topsy Turvy. Other than that, in the songwriting and me just putzing around at home and and spending a lot of time at the theater. I'm in charge of the soundscape there. I commission or ask, put in for new equipment, and I install it and I balance it and I make sure that everything that comes in there sounds as good as possible. And so that's one of my jobs there. So, and that's a lot of fun. The technical side of it is kind of another thing that I've done since I was a teenager, and
Yeah.
comes and goes, but that technical thing is a good good talent to have for me. It keeps me in the one of the ways of keeping me in the moment that's not strictly artistic, and
Yeah.
it's that the geek in me.
Well, it balances things out then.
Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing, man. Thank you so much for your time, buddy. I appreciate it on this Saturday afternoon / morning for you.
Well, it's we have the May gray going here, so it's like gloomy outside, which is so it's my pleasure, and it's good to see and talk with you too.
My pleasure too. Thank you so much, David. We'll be in
All right,
touch again.
see you
Take
soon.
care. Bye-bye.